Hello, and welcome to this second installment of translating Julius Caesar's account of the Battle of Pharsalus in Book 3 of his Civil War. Today, looking at section 84, in which he relates some of the preparations that he's making for what he suspects is an upcoming battle with Pompey at Pharsalus. So, let us get cracking. Re frumentaria preparata confirmatis quae militibus et satis longo spatio temporis adoracinis proelius intermisso, quo satis perspectum habere militum animum videretur, temptandum Caesar existimavit quidnam Pompeius propositi aut voluntatis ad demicandum haberet. So a little bit going on there. If you want to jump straight to the verb, you're going to have to go to the next clause because there's no main verb in this first line or clause. We have to wait a little while. So we'll just take the first line as it comes. And in true Caesarean style, it's a series of ablative absolutes to open the section. So we've got re frumentaria preparata, confirmatis quae militibus, and longo spatio intermisso temporis. That's a genitive. We'll come back to that. So let's start with the first one. Preparata is perfect tense. That's feminine singular, agreeing with re frumentaria. Frumentaria being wheat or grain. It'll pop up in translation as corn quite often, which is a bit of a Britishism. It just means grain. And ray being the ablative singular of raise, like matter. So really, preparata, like to make ready in advance, like English prepare, that's where that comes from. In this context, he's secured the grain supply. So really the grain supply having been secured, quae and confirmatis militibus. So we've got ablative plural of the word for soldier here. Confirmatis agreeing with that, like English confirm, but in the sense of a strengthening. And in this case, it may be both physical and mental, because he's had to secure the grain supply. Prior to that, they were living off the local crushed raka mixed with milk to make what they like to call bread. Probably not the best diet. So having secured the grain supply, their diet is probably making them feel both physically and mentally better now that they've returned to something somewhat more normal. And the soldiers being strengthened, or even the resolution of the soldiers being strengthened. I've seen a few translations along those lines. But really, the soldiers being strengthened, and that can be either physical or mental or both. Another and, but et. Satis, which is an adverb, like English satisfactory, really sufficiently in this case. And we don't have really a proper indefinite article in Latin. So we'll just go with a longo spatio. So that's ablative singular. Long space is fairly clear from that. Really long duration though, or long period, because we've got this partitive genitive of the word for time. So it's a long period of time. Intermisso, another perfect tense participle, so agreeing with longo spatio. English intermission is related to this, really having intervened. So a long period of time, or a sufficiently long period of time, having intervened. Adoracinus proelius. So we have this preposition meaning motion away from. Adoracinus proelius. So proelius is ablative plural of the word battle, so battles. And Doracinus is adjectival, agreeing with battles. It's the adjectival form of the city of Dyrrachium. So really the Dyrrachian, we might say in English, or the Dyrrhachine, something like that, however you want to describe the people of Dyrrachium. But in any case, a sufficiently long period of time has intervened, like literally from the Dyrrachian battles, since the Dyrrachian battles is the same thing. So a little bit going on there. Onto the second line. Quosadis perspectum habere militum animum videretur. So we've got our main verb here, which we may as well make use of. So actually, I'll do the relative pronoun first. That's an ablative singular. That's referring back to this antecedent, longo spatio intermisso temporis. Ablative of really time during which, yeah, that's how I'd go with that. During which time, and our main verbs, that's passive, imperfect, third person singular. In the subjunctive, really, he seemed. So it's the verb for seeing, but in the passive. So really, he seemed. That's taking an infinitive as its direct object, habere. So to hold, that's pretty close to English have, and is the word from which English have derives. And in languages like Spanish, like habas español, really it's more not just having something, but holding something, and from that, holding power over something, having command of something, having control of something. And so, if you ask habas español, it's like, it's not just do you have a Spanish in your pocket or something, it's like, do you have command of the Spanish language? So this is more the sense of what is meant here. He seemed to hold, and we've got the accusative singular animals, that's direct object, that infinitive. To hold, it can be translated in so many different ways. In this context, more like morale. Like it can mean the mind, the spirit, the soul, um, feeling, temperament, a lot of different things. In this context, more like the morale. Militum, possessive genitive plural of the word for soldiers. So the morale of the soldiers he held. And then we've got this, we're here, so this participle, perfect tense agreeing with animum, but it's not, it's more of a predicate in this line here, in this clause. It's like as understood, like perspectum, to have a perspective on something, but in a sort of more informed, educated way, to reach a conclusion about something, and satis again, sufficiently. So he literally holds, he seemed to hold the morale of the soldiers as sufficiently understood. You might want to translate that a little more straightforwardly in English. Something like he seemed to have gauged the morale of the soldiers, or seemed to have accurately gauged the morale of the soldiers. Something like that. Spectrum understood, gauged, yeah. And moving on, so temptandum. This is a gerundive, and yes, like English tempt, but more in the biblical sense of temptation, like 40 days out in the desert. It's a trial, a test to prove something, and it's a gerundive of necessity, agreeing with quidnam, so they're both accusative. It's really, it must be tested. May as well cover that now. Quidnam, it's a sort of compound of a relative pronoun, but it has an indefinite meaning. So what it's probably better to translate the rest of the sentence before trying to make sense of that. Otherwise, it's just going to sound really peculiar. But from temptandum, the gerund of necessity, sort of get must be tested, must be proven, must be established, ascertained. And Caesar, so that's our nominative subject for the verb, existamavit, which is one of Caesar's favorite verbs. That's perfect tense, third person singular, active, indicative. So really, Caesar judged. It's usually what that means. Make an assessment. Um, he judged it necessary to test, or it was necessary to be tested. John is passive. And get away with translating that as an active in some circumstances. Come back to this sort of indefinite pronoun, literally means what. Um, and what Pompeius, so we have another nominative, so the subject for haberet here, which is a subjunctive, that's third person singular, active, imperfect subjunctive. Me, so that's of habere. So again, the same verb, what Pompeius held, and that's where really the sense of like command over something or even really intention, um, like what Pompeius was intending. And we've got two genitives here of partitive genitives, propositi aut voluntatis. What he intended, so the genitive's kind of taking a further extending the meaning, kind of adjectival. It's propositi, like somewhat related to English proposition, like it's a plan. Again, something sort of put together from being informed of the facts. And that's in the singular of a plan, of a strategy in this context. That's what I've gone for. Out, so or voluntatis, it's like English volunteer, voluntary, like a wish or a desire. Ad demicandum. So this is a gerundive with in the accusative singular with the preposition ad. Is it gerundive? Gerund, not gerundive. With the preposition ad, the purpose, really. So a desire for fighting. So Caesar judged it was necessary to be tested what Pompeius intended. Um, I mean, literally of a strategy or wish for fighting. Um, really, what Pompeius intended, yeah, strategically, or if he wanted a battle, something along those lines. That's the kind of sense that Caesar's going for. And so, just as a one form of translation, the grain supply having been secured and his soldiers restored. So that's another sense of confirmatis, sort of a restoration. Restored, as well as a sufficiently long period of time having intervened since the Dracian battles, during which he seemed to have sufficiently gauged the morale of the soldiery. Caesar judged it necessary to establish what Pompey intended in terms of a strategy or of a commitment to battle. So I've really, that last piece about Pompey, I've stretched it out a little bit just to make the meaning a little bit clearer. Um, so I've changed wish to commitment just to make it clearer to an English reader. It's not just that Pompey like wants to go out and fight a battle because he thinks it's fun. It's like he's the commander in chief of the forces, and so it's going to be a rational decision, and really part of the strategy. But battle is one strategy. A different strategy would be, which has been done many times by the time Caesar gets to this section, is to cut off food supplies, or to cut off all supplies, really. Um, so Caesar attempted to do this to Pompey at Dyrrhachium. It went a little bit pear-shaped, but he also did this to Afranius in Spain. and Afranius did this to Caesar earlier in Spain as well. And it can be very effective. So in the case of Spain, Caesar forced Afranius to surrender without fighting a major engagement. Hence, to go back to this, Acutius Rufus accused Lucius Afranius of betraying the army in Spain. Caesar cut off their supplies and forced them to surrender. So I think in this case, that's really what Caesar means. That either Pompey wants a battle on the spot, or he's kind of, as we'll actually get to in a little bit, maybe he's just sitting around and his intention is not to fight a battle, but to cut Caesar off and force him to surrender. And Caesar himself considered this a more humane way to win the civil war, which in modern times, using starvation as a weapon of war is a breach of the Geneva Convention. We have a rather different view on things now, but for Caesar and for Pompey, and I think it's a general opinion of this time, it was considered more humane to cut off all supplies and force the enemy to surrender through starvation than to fight a battle and see lots of people killed that way. And different perspective. And that is most of what I had to say about that. I think the subjunctive here, I think Caesar's indicating his own state of mind at the time that this action is taking place. So it's not a certain thing, it's not an established thing. So it seems that at this time he's got things under control, but he still needs to figure out what it is that Pompey intends. And so these things are in the subjunctive to sort of indicate a kind of future potential that hasn't happened for this past Caesar. And yeah, I think that's about it for the first section. So let's not carry on yet. That's what I want to talk about, the gerundive. So firstly, I think it's obvious by now I get these mixed up. So there's gerundives and gerunds. So the gerund is the purpose, gerundive is different. It's for necessity or suitability. So in this case, necessity, there is a very famous gerundive of necessity from an earlier time, just before the Third War with Carthage. The elder Cato repeatedly, apparently after every speech, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. There is a more recent example of this, so I thought just for a bit of fun, have a look at that quickly. So this is the Hogwarts crest with the Latin motto. That's from my copy of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So very quickly, the Latin inscribed in the banner there, Draco Dormiens nunquam titulandus, roughly translated, the sleeping dragon must never be roused, must never be awakened. The titulandus there is a gerundive of necessity. So usually the verb to be, it usually be like titulandus est. The verb to be is usually understood and left out of the written language. But there it is. And exactly what is meant by this? I mean, it sounds kind of like uh, Let Sleeping Dogs Lie, but in this sort of magical universe, it's Let Sleeping Dragons Lie. Perhaps. Or there's something else going on. Draco Dragon, yes, but it can be extended to mean many different kinds of reptiles, like snakes and lizards. And so it seems to me like this is a rather sinister reference to the Chamber of Secrets. And I can't help the feeling that maybe Salazar Slytherin has signed his crime here. Or perhaps not. I'd be interested to know how that conversation went. But in any case, that's just a bit of fun. So that's from Harry Potter's Hogwarts coat of arms. Anyway, so I think that's all for the first section. I should probably move on anyway. Okay. Itaque ex castris exequitum eduxit aciemque instruxit primum suis locis palloque a castris Pompeii longius continentibus vero diebus ut progrederetur a castris suis collibusque Pompeianis aciem subicerat. Okay. So, ooh, yeah, let's just start with that. So, itaque, it's kind of a compound of ita and que. You could say and thus, really therefore. That's what that means. So it's an adverb ex castris. So we have ex, that preposition meaning motion away from, with the ablative plural of the word for camp. So literally from the camps, usually in English it's translated in the singular just to mean camp. Like in English, camp really can refer to, it's not like fish, like it can refer to one or it can refer collectively. But literally from the camps. Eduxit, we'll jump to the verb here. So that's an indicative verb, third person singular active, perfect tense. He led, but he led away from. Um, Probably redundant considering that's already captured by this, but that's the verb he's gone with. So he led away from, and that's referring back to Caesar. Exequitum, accusative singular of the word for army. So he's led the army from the camp, que, and instruxit. So that's the same everything as eduxit. Instruxit, though, meaning it's not quite instruction in English. It's to make, it's organize something, to make order out of it. In a military context, really, he's forming up the line, aciem, accusative singular. So the legions of this time would usually fight in a formation called the triplex acies, triple lines. Caesar's forming up his line, so he leads the army out of camp and forms up the line. And the manner in which he does this, so primum, like English prime, so this is adverbial at first. Suis locis, so we have the ablative plural of the word for really like place or ground, location, area. Um, Again, going for context, I've said zone of control. Really, yeah, his own sort of ground or area, like, but it's, as will become clear, it's his own like safe area. He's not just leading his army out and hoping for the best. So it's his area, suis. So that's the possessive adjective, agreeing with locus, third person, in the plural, no? Um, so his own area, zone of control, etc. Que and I'm just going to jump to this last. So this is a comparative adjective. So you could say longer, but really further. And it's further pallo, so that's ablative singular, the word for little. Further by a little. Acastris, so we've met this before, from the camp. Pompey, that's possessive genitive singular of Pompeius, so from Pompey's camp. So at first he's kind of within his own area, really closer to his own camp than he is to Pompey's. Um, Although it's sort of been expressed in a different way here. He is saying a little further from Pompey's camp than his own. And we have this sort of adverbial phrase, continentibus vero diebus. So we have diebus. This is the ablative plural for the word for day. And continentibus is a participle agreeing with that. Vero is adverbial. It's actually the ablative of veros. Here it means like but or nevertheless, nonetheless. So but diebus. So day is fine. Continentibus. It's not geographical. The continent derives from this word. It's and sort of joining together. This was a difficult one to translate, and I don't like the modern English translations of it. So I've gone with something different. So it does mean something joined together, but as a whole, so a continent, you think as many joined together as one. And from that sense, it can also mean adjacent. So the usual translation of this is on the following days or during the following days, something like that. Personally, I don't like that because he's setting up what is a consecutive clause here. So I don't particularly like the idea that it's just on the following days. I think what he's really meaning here, um, since I am an expert, apparently, he's incrementing, like he's going a little bit further every day. So at first, he's sort of in his safe area, but every day he's going a little bit further. And that sets up the consecutive clause, which is to follow. So yeah, I've gone for something more like gaining ground each day, but the standard English translations that I've seen, so that's from Jane Gardner's translation in The Penguin and in Kennedy's commentary on Book 3 of Caesar's Civil War, they both translate this as an ablative of time, like time during which. I'm not going to do that, but just as a word of warning that standard translations usually do. In any case, the consecutive clause that follows, so we've got ut and subjunctive verbs, so that progrediretur, so he imperfect subjunctive. This is active with a passive form because it's from a deponent verb. We sort of get English progress from this. So the person singular, he advanced or would advance. Acastris again, or acastris suis. So again, we got that possessive adjective agreeing with the ablative plural. So from his own camp, and subicerat. So we've got sub, so that, like in English, sort of indicating under, or here more like at the base of something. Subicerat, same as progrediretur in terms of tense and person and being active. Again, another word for forming up, really. Aciem's the direct object there in the accusative singular. He's forming up his line below or at the base of. That's actually contained within the verb itself. Collibus Pompeianis. So collibus, ablative plural of the word for hill. So we have the hills. Pompeianis. That's actually adjectival of Pompey that's agreeing with hills. Literally, he formed up his line below or at the base of the Pompeian hills. And so here's what I've got. Again, just to remind people that I've gone against the standard English translation for part of this. Therefore, he led the army out of the camp and formed up the battle line. First within his own zone of control, a little further away from Pompey's camp, but nonetheless gaining ground daily. That's my personal translation. so that he would advance from his own camp and form up his line at the base of the Pompeian hills. So Caesar's done this as a way, this is his way of testing what Pompey's intentions were. So leads his troops out a little further every day, gets to the bottom of the hill where Pompey's camped. His idea is if Pompey comes out to fight, then he knows that, okay, Pompey wants a battle. If he doesn't, then he begins to suspect that Pompey doesn't want a battle here. He's intending to cut off my supplies, basically. And therefore, I need to take steps to secure my supplies, take more steps, really. Caesar's been fairly optimistic when he says the food supply has been secured. It's been secured for a very short period of time. Uh, this is what he's doing. And another reason he's doing it, we will cover in this sentence here. So, quaeres in dies confirmatiorum eos executum efficiebat. So this is our relative pronoun, feminine singular nominative. So it's Greek raise, which is the same. A very flexible word, really in this military context. So quae, the relative pronoun, really means this. Raise, operation, proceeding. Yeah, something like operation, I think, for the military context. Um, and we'll jump to our verbs. So that's indicative, imperfect again, third person singular active. Quaeres is the subject, though, not Caesar. So this operation, like English effect, the verb, like to cause something to happen, to give rise to something, so to effect a change, for example. So really, it caused executum eos. So executum, direct object, accusative singular for army. Eos is the genitive singular of the demonstrative adjective. So it's often used like this, obviously to indicate possession. But yeah, it's not used in agreement, which would be a different meaning. It's used sort of substantively as its own pronoun. Caused his army confirmatiorum. So that's accusative singular. It is agreeing with executum, but again, it's a predicate. Um, and it's a comparative as well. So we've met confirmatives before, so a strengthening. So really, this proceeding, uh, it's really caused his army to be stronger. Um, and so I've got the verb to be there, not in the text, but as understood. This proceeding caused his army to be stronger in dies. So we have preposition in with the accusative plural of the word for day. Really translate that as daily. It's adverbial in English would be the most natural way. I think in with the accusative is more like through the days, which really for English would just be daily. And yeah, this Operation Daily strengthened the morale of the army. I've put morale in there just to be clear on what Caesar means by this. Also to separate out what may be also a physical strengthening by an improved diet. It's making his soldiers feel more confident of victory. So this is one of the ways in which Caesar addresses the battered morale of his soldiers after they'd lost at Dyrrhachium. He's leading them out a little bit further every day, so he's not just throwing them into the deep end. He's slowly exposing them, getting them used to Pompey's camp. Probably the size of the camp as well is an indication of the size of the forces that they're going to have to confront. He's getting them used to that, and also demonstrating his own confidence, which is going to cascade down to his subordinate officers and down to the rank and file. Yeah, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. We're confident of victory. We can take these guys. Don't worry. Okay, and moving on. Superius tamen institutum in equitibus quod demonstravimus servabat, ut quoniam numero multis partibus esset inferior, adolescentes atque expeditos ex ante signanis electis ad penicitatem armis inter equites proveliari uberat, qui quotidiana consuetudine iusum quoque eius generis proveliorum percipirat. Okay, so where do we want to start with this? Let's start with tamen, so that just means however. So something of a contrast with the preceding. Superius, like English superior, like, but in this case referring to time, so it's really the earlier, and that's agreeing with, so it's comparative adjective, that's agreeing with institutum, which these are both in the accusative. So institutum, uh, not an institute as we'd normally think of it. It's more a way of doing things, a mode or a manner of organizing things. So really, in this context, I've gone with tactics. It'll sort of become clear that's what basically what he means. So the earlier tactics is what he's referring to. And we'll jump to our verb. So this is, again, the imperfect indicative, third person singular active. So this is referring back to Caesar. Really, he retained um, that sense of serve, like a servant. If you think of it's somewhat old-fashioned, but the word retainer in English, which has the same kind of sense, like someone in service to a lord. That's really this is where that comes from. So a servant is really meant to, linguistically at least, the conception of them is they are someone who maintains the household. They keep things running, um, and therefore they keep everything as it is. And so they are sort of retaining the usual way of doing things. And so he retained the earlier tactic in equidibus. So it's the preposition in with ablative plural of the word for horseman. So we have really among the cavalry. Um, quod demonstravimus. So that demonstravimus. Caesar's gone for the royal pronoun here. So it's an interesting distinction between author and when he's referring to himself in the past. He's become more than one person. So first person plural, that's perfect tense, active. Demonstrate is pretty clear from that. Like he's referring to what he's written earlier. So really that he demonstrated, that he related, that he detailed, that he described, something like that. So he's retained something. He's retained the tactics which he described earlier. However, just in case you missed it, or if you started translating at section 83 instead of section 1, Caesar's going to remind us of that. And so he's got ut. It's a here. It's not precisely consecutive. It's like it is, but it's more explanatory. So this ut is it's more like a namely, or that is to say, or to wit, or namely that. Quoniam. So this means like since or because. And normally that would take an indicative verb, but because it's kind of nested in this ut consecutive clause, the verb is subjunctive. And so it's third person singular active, imperfect. Really, since he would be numero multis partibus. So Number, numeral, pretty clear from that. Ablative singular. Uh, these are all ablative of measure. In number, multis partibus. So we've gone from singular to plural. Many agreeing with partibus, parts. So by many parts, or really by in number, by many degrees, by many parts, yeah, something like that. Inferior, which is it hasn't changed its meaning in a few thousand years. So it's since in number he would be in inferior by many degrees, literally. Um, he would be numerically inferior, something like that. Um, and where do we want to go from here? Okay, let's just go to the verb. So he ordered. So that's another subjunctive, third person singular active. He ordered adolescentes atque expeditos, and expeditos is going to have a whole coming after it. But adolescentes atque expeditos. So adolescentes, not really adolescents. It's young men, but young men in Caesar's army of fighting age. So these are kind of the 18, 19, 20, early 20s, those sort of young men, not child soldiers. Atque expeditos. So atque is another way of saying and in Latin. It has a more emphatic kind of meaning though. Really means something like as well as, although it can have other meanings as well, like and what's more, and you won't believe this. In this case, as well as, kind of like in the famous phrase from Catullus, "Ave atque vale." It's like hello and farewell, or hello as well as farewell. So as well as, so the young man as well as expeditos. So that's our accusative plural again. Literally unencumbered. I mean, but really in this case, it's more like lightly armored. Uh, when the army prepares for battle, they are all expeditos. They are all unencumbered. So I think the distinction here is really those who are lightly armored. And these are ex ante signanis electis. So they are from, that's the preposition again, ante signanis. So they are like English ante, like that which comes before, indicating before, which we kind of took from Latin. Signanis, so that's ablative plural, signal, kind of clear from that, but in this context, or really in this period of time, signal is flag, and they are electis, so it's a participle agreeing with antesignanis. They're not voted in though; they're chosen. Well, there's an election of one person, which is Caesar deciding, and so they are selected from those who go before the flags. So really the like frontline soldiers, front rank soldiers, but they're lightly armored as well. So I think they're more in the nature of um, basically skirmishers. I don't. These are not heavily armored legionaries, I don't think. Um, and they are chosen ad pernicitatem armis. They are chosen ad with the accusative, not gerundival, but this is adjectival. Pernicitatem, not pernicious either. This is agility or swiftness, and they are chosen really for the purpose of swiftness or agility. Ablative plural of arms, weaponry, in arms, their agility in arms. Though I think this refers to like all of their gear, not just like swords and spears, but their actual like armor and so on. Um, and he has ordered them inter equites proeliare. So we'll take the infinitive verb first. So we've seen the noun battle, and this is the verb battle. Just like in English, to battle is a verb, and a battle is a noun. This is to battle, to fight, inter equites. So among, like English inter, equites accusative plural, the horsemen among the cavalry. So Barrett actually is taking both the accusative plural um, with its very long description and the infinitive as objects. So he's ordered young men, lightly armored troops, selected from the front line for their agility in arms to fight among the cavalry. And then we have a relative pronoun introducing a relative clause. Still going. Qui, which nominative plural masculine, it's the antecedent is adolescentes atque expeditos. Really though, it's one of those, well, you could say it's a peculiarity of Latin, although I think English is more the peculiar one. It requires the relative pronoun, sort of like modern languages do as well, like French and Italian. They'll require the relative pronoun, whereas English doesn't. In English, we'd say these men, and that's really the sense of it. But Latin and Romance languages like require that relative pronoun. So really, these men. We'll go to the verb percipient. So it's another subjunctive. This is third person plural. So qui being the subject. Yeah, third person plural active. Might perceive in the sense of learning something, picking up a skill. That's sort of what Caesar's getting at here. So percipient usum is the direct object. Accusative singular. Use, like in English, doesn't really cover it. It's more like skill, experience, um, something along those lines. They've picked up the expertise, and they've done this quotidiana consuetudine. So consuetudine is habit in this context, more like practice or drill. Ablative singular, quotidiana agreeing with it. We actually met quotidiana in the last section, so daily, agreeing with consuetudine. So by daily practice, it's an ablative of means. Daily practice, daily drill, something like that. They've picked up this skill. I'll come back to that. That's just an adverb. Generis. So in English, we have like in biology a genus, which is really a class or a category. Comes from Latin word genus. So generis is the genitive singular. And it's got eos, the demonstrative adjective, functioning as an adjective, agreeing with it. So this kind, proeliorum, so it's a word for battle again, in the genitive plural. This kind of warfare, this kind of, I mean, battles sounds a bit weird. Skirmishing, something along those lines. I've gone with warfare, just to try and capture a collective sense, I guess, that I can't quite reach with a plural. Like me. And the adverb just meaning also. So these men, by daily practice, acquired, in the sense of learning something, acquired expertise, really of this kind of fighting. You could say of this kind of warfare, quoque, as well. And yeah, that's about it. So, what I've got, however, he retained the earlier tactics among the cavalry that we described, namely that, since he would be numerically inferior by many degrees, he ordered younger men as well as light troops from the front ranks, chosen for their agility in arms, to fight in direct support of the cavalry. Through daily practice, these men acquired expertise in this kind of warfare as well. So you can see I've broken this into two sentences because I felt it was getting a little too stilted in English. I've also changed into equites to indirect support of the cavalry. My suspicion is that these infantrymen were fighting in units. They were fighting in centuries or maniples or something along those lines. They're not individuals just sort of dispersed among the cavalry. And what I think is going on here is the cavalry and infantry detachments would basically leapfrog around. And so the cavalry might advance to a position and hold it. And the infantry, that enables the infantry to then advance or maybe cover their flank or something along those lines. And they're basically supporting each other throughout. Or vice versa, maybe the infantry advances and holds a position so the cavalry can then go out and maybe quick skirmish with the enemy cavalry, and then they have a safe place to retreat back to where the infantry can support them. So I think this is more what Caesar's getting at. That's my suspicion anyway. So I've changed in English. I've not gone for something literal. What I suspect is what Caesar meant. Could be completely wrong about that though. Yeah, I think that's about all. But you can see here that Caesar's addressing his deficiency. He's realized that there's a bit of a problem here. I don't have enough cavalry to fight Pompey's cavalry, so he's innovated this solution, which I think he picked this up in his campaigns in Gaul. There's a major battle just before Alesia where Vercingetorix attacks Caesar's army on the march with overwhelming cavalry numbers, and Caesar's able to beat this off, partly because he's used the infantry as supporting arms for his, again, cavalry in number, many parts inferior. He's used the infantry to support them. And so that's a major contribution to his victory in Gaul. I think he's decided to sort of apply a similar operational concept here. But that's speculation. I could be completely wrong about that. Okay, next sentence. His erat rebus effectum ut equitum mille etiam apertioribus locis septem millium Pompeianorum impetuum cum adesset usus sustenere auderent neque magna peri eorum multitudine terrerentur. Okay. So we have an ablative, but not an ablative absolute, starting here. So rebus is our ablative plural of raise. Once again, that versatile word just pops up all over the place. These matters, but in the ablative, his demonstrative adjective agreeing with it. Really, these matters, but in the ablative of means or agent means it's not an agent. By these means, by these tactics, by these proceedings, by these operations. And then we've got a pluperfect passive of here, which we've met before, efficiebat. So this is effectum erat. Kind of broken up, this happens quite a lot. The verb to be in the passive construction is separated from the participle. That efficiere. So it had been so it'd been brought about by these means that, and we have another consecutive clause. Okay, we're gonna have to bounce around here to get this to make sense. So we'll start here. Mille equitum. So we've got mille, 1,000. equitum, genitive plural of the word for cavalry. So we have 1,000 of cavalry. Do, 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 do. And we'll jump to the verb. So we'll take the subject and then we'll go to so auderent. So consecutive clause that's in the subjunctive. Third person plural, imperfect, active. They would dare is literally what that means. You can probably go for, I mean, you can retain that if you want to. Um, something like they could commit or they could venture. And that's taken in infinitive as the direct or one of the direct objects. Pardon me, sustenere. So somewhat related to English sustain, but here it's really withstand. So the present infinitive active. They could dare to withstand. They could commit to withstand. Sort of nested temporal clause. So cum with the subjunctive. So adesset, that's third person singular active of the verb. Really to be present is what that means. Ad plus the verb to be, so a compound. And usus, another versatile word. Not really use here. More like necessity. When the necessity was present or when the need arose is a little bit more natural in English. So the cavalry were able to withstand when the need arose. Impetuum, so that's accusative singular. The charge. Septem, rather, millium Pompeianorum. So 7 of thousands, so it's genitive plural again. Pompeianorum, genitive plural of the adjectival form of Pompey's name. So able to withstand the charge, the advance. I think I was a bit dramatic and went with onslaught of 7,000 of the Pompeians. I almost went back into the Latin for that. Of the Pompeians. Etiam apertioribus locis. So even, we've met that before a few times. Even apertioribus. So this is adjectival. Ablative plural agreeing with locis. Quite open, rather open, more open. Ground or grounds, but really ground, we'd say in English, just in the singular. Like aperte in Italian, perto. So rather open ground. And so Caesar's saying, even in that scenario, he knows he's on unfavorable ground here. But even in this scenario, his cavalry can go out and engage with the Pompeians should the need arise. Neque and not. Magna pere, it's an adverb, so greatly. Terre rentor is a passive verb. That's in the imperfect tense, third person plural. Be terrified. Be terrorized is probably going a bit far. Really, be dismayed. So, and not be greatly dismayed. Multitudine, it's in the ablative singular, so like by the and multitudes, probably low-hanging fruit. By the vast number, the great number. Overwhelming might be stretching it a bit far, but the great number, eorum. So that's our demonstrative adjective, genitive plural. Again, used substantively, so it's really a pronoun. The great number of them. So he's brought it about by these clever tactics, these clever operations, that 1,000 cavalry, even on fairly open ground, should the need arise, they were able to withstand the charge of 7,000 Pompeians and not be greatly dismayed by their numbers. And I think that's roughly what I've got here. By these tactics, it had been brought about that 1,000 cavalry, even on quite open ground, could venture to withstand the onslaught of 7,000 Pompeians when the need arose and not be greatly dismayed by the vast number of them. So some exciting stuff there. Caesar's sort of figured out how to sort of teams offset Pompey's major superiority in cavalry. And on to the last sentence. Namque etiam per eos dies proelium secundum equestre fecit, atque unum alabrogum ex duobus quos profugisse ad Pompeium supra docuimus, cum quibusdam interfecit. Maybe. So, starting with namque, just indeed. And let's jump to our subject and verb. So equestre is actually nominative singular for cavalry. And like English cavalry, it's sort of has a singular form referring like a collective. It's referring to plural, but grammatically singular. So cavalry fecit, so that's perfect tense, third person singular active. Literally make, like French faire or Italian facere. It's literally to make, but it's a standard phrase in Latin to make either a battle, as is the case here, or a charge, which we'll come to in a future section. But literally, like really, the cavalry fought proelium secundum. So that's accusative singular direct object. A battle, but qualified by secundum. So a second battle. So indeed, the cavalry etiam even fought a second battle per eos dies, per through with the accusative plural dies of day, and the demonstrative adjective actually acting as an adjective, literally through these days, but really during this time. So the cavalry fought a second battle during this time. So this is kind of proving Caesar's point. Atque, and what's more, and Caesar's quite excited about this. Unum alabrogam exturbobus. So one, note the accusative too. So one alabroge, that's a Gallic tribe, ex duobus. So we got that ex preposition with the ablative plural of two. So one alabroge from the two. And then we go into sort of relative pronoun here, accusative plural. It's not only a relative clause, but also an accusative and infinitive. Quos profugisse. Really, one from the two who had fled. So that's a perfect infinitive, active. Ad Pompeium to Pompey, so ad plus accusative. In this case, the physical motion towards rather than the sort of more abstract purpose or goal or aim. Ad Pompeium, they literally went to Pompey. Go to the verb docuimus. And again, Caesar has multiplied himself and become a first person plural. So royal pronoun, perfect tense. It's like English, like document, like the verb document. But again, really, as we noted, as we related, as we recorded, as we wrote, supra above. So one of those alabroges from the two who had fled Pompey, as we related above. Yeah, we'll go to the verb interfecit. So equestre is the subject for this again. So this is also perfect tense, third person singular active, indicative. Killed. So the subject is unum alabrogam ex duobus quos profugisse ad Pompeium. So they killed one of the alabroges, the cavalry. Cum quibusdam. So in this case, cum is a preposition with the ablative plural Quibusdam is a kind of compound from the relative pronoun. Again, it has a there's almost like grades of indefinite pronouns in Latin that compounds of the relative. So this is really along with certain others. So from that we get something like, indeed, the cavalry even fought a second battle during this time, and one of the Allobroges from the two who had fled to Pompey, as we had related above, was killed along with some others. And that's more or less what I wrote, I think. Indeed, during this time, the cavalry even fought a second battle, killed one of the pair of, yeah, so I've gone with pair of, um, a bit more natural in English rather than saying one from the two. But if you want to be very literal, that's what you've got. Killed one of the pair of Allobroges who, as we related above, had deserted to Pompey along with certain others. So, I mean, the reason Caesar's mentioning this with a certain amount of emphasis, it's not only a demonstration of his operations with cavalry working, also he feels, but there's a sense of really of calmer Roman style for the Allobroge. So this desertion had occurred just before the battles at Dyrrhachium. Um, the cause of it, at least as Caesar relates it, is that the soldiers serving under the Allobroges, so they're their own countrymen really, had reported to Caesar. They'd accused their commanding officers, whose names are Rucillus and Egus, accused them of embezzlement, not paying them, not supplying them properly. Caesar had decided to let the matter sit in abeyance until he had defeated Pompey, but the soldiers decided to take matters into their own hands, and it became clear to Rucillus and Egus that they were going to be killed by their own men, or at least some of them, and so they fled to Pompey, and basically informed Pompey of all the sort of weak points in Caesar's fortifications at Dyrrhachium, and this directly contributed to Pompey's victory, Caesar's defeat, and Caesar having to bail out of there. So Caesar's quite pleased that one of these Allobroges has been killed in this battle. Especially the betrayal hits harder, I think, for Caesar because he relates elsewhere. These two had served him throughout his war in Gaul, and they'd served him for quite a long time. He says that they'd given him excellent service. He'd made them either senators in their own tribal council, like their own tribal government, or he'd actually made them Roman senators. And so their betrayal hits him pretty hard. On me. But he's quite happy with the karma. Having said that, I don't think this is really a coincidence. I have the feeling that this is something more in the nature of a battlefield assassination by those who were remaining in Caesar's army. That they didn't want to let these guys get away with their embezzlement, and even worse, that they had deserted to Pompey. So there was kind of a double motive there. And so they've cornered one of them during the battle and taken him out. Or at least that's my opinion of that. And so that's more or less it for section 84. So Caesar's really it's a big contrast with section 83, where he was relating the Pompeian command arguing among themselves about like political and religious office and punishing collaborators, taking people's money, and not at all focusing on the battle or the war that was right before their eyes. Whereas, by contrast, this is all that Caesar's focusing on, is just getting through the day. Um, and so it is a very strong contrast in that sense. Caesar's saying that's why they lost, and this is why he's going to win. He's actually focused on addressing all of his deficiencies. So he's short of grain, okay, secure the grain supply. Soldiers, yep, restore them back to health, both mentally and physically. Um, understand like what their state of mind is before we go into battle. Figure out what Pompey's strategy is. Get the soldiers feeling confident of victory, and address our inferiority in cavalry by some sort of innovative tactics that are going to ensure that we at least can withstand the charge and buy ourselves some time to deal with it. So it's a big contrast with what's going on in Pompey's command tent, and Caesar somewhat painting himself as the underdog, which I guess is true considering all of the difficulties that he's labouring under. But in any case, that is section 84. So hopefully that was reasonably enjoyable and educational. Important to emphasize, this is my translation. It is not definitive, nor the only translation, as I hope I've made clear. In any case, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, take care, and toodle pip.